Hey Recroom players! In this video we'll learn all about the Rangefinder gadget. The Rangefinder is used to measure distances in real time, with accuracy down to the millimeter. Its job is to output lots of useful information that can be used to control circuits and gadgets for your Recroom creations. It tickles. The Rangefinder has a lot of very technical uses which are up to all of you to discover. We're excited to see what you and the creator community can come up with. But to get a better idea of what it does, here are a couple basic applications. You can try using it in a puzzle room to give players information about how close they are to some object or player. You can also use it to determine when an object or player passes in front of something. Try using one to set up a deadly trap with an explosive trip mine. We're going to see a lot of uses for the Rangefinder paired together with a look-at gizmo, because the look-at can keep objects and gadgets like the Rangefinder pointed directly at objects and players. And that's a great way to track the distance to something from any direction. Check out the description for a link to a video all about how to use the look-at gizmo. Let's get started by finding the maker pen. Open your watch menu and press the backpack button to find the maker pen, then press the use button to spawn it. To spawn a Rangefinder, look at the top of your maker pen and press the open palette button. You can search for the Rangefinder using the palette search feature, or you can go to Gadgets, Other Gadgets, and on the second page, find the Rangefinder. First, let's check out what kind of info the Rangefinder has to offer. Remember, if you select the wire tool and hover over any gadget pin, you'll get a helpful tooltip about what it does. The red output pin is where the magic happens. This pin outputs the distance to the object in front of it, or a -1 if there's nothing there. I've set up the sign to display the number it's receiving on its red input pin. You can find the sign prop by searching for it in the palette. Now I'll use the wire tool to connect the distance output pin of the Rangefinder to the sign. And now, as I push this crate closer to the Rangefinder, the sign updates to tell everybody in the room where it's at. The green and blue output pins tell you what the Rangefinder's beam is hitting. If the beam is hitting an object, you'll get that object's object ID from the green pin. If it's a player, you'll get that player's player ID from the blue pin. The Rangefinder's got two input pins. The red pin is on-off. 0 is off and any non-zero number is on. Anytime the Rangefinder is off, the output pins won't output any information. The green pin is the maximum distance for the Rangefinder beam. You can set this number to cut the Rangefinder beam off at a certain length, and the Rangefinder won't find any information for players or objects beyond that distance. If you set this number to 0, then there's no limit. Let's check out the configure options for the Rangefinder. Use the Configure tool in your Maker Pen to open the Configure menu. First, let's skip to the second page and talk about units. The Rangefinder defaults to telling us centimeters, but if you want to get really accurate, you can switch this to millimeters. If you're working with bigger distances and you want to make things more readable for players, think about switching this to meters. Now let's talk about ignoring and filtering. These functions are similar but distinct. The ignore settings will affect how the Rangefinder's beam works, while filtering only affects the green and blue output pins. Ignore objects means the beam will pass through objects and only ever find players. Ignore players means the beam will pass through players and only ever find objects. Now for the filters. We'll talk about objects first. By default, the green pin on the Rangefinder will output the object ID of any and every solid object that the Rangefinder beam hits. What filters do is tell the Rangefinder not to output an object's ID unless it has the correct tag. Tags can be added to any object using the Configure tool. In the Configure menu for the bucket, we can see it already has the tag bucket. Now I'll tell the Rangefinder to filter for the bucket. And I can see that the green pin is still telling me the bucket's object ID. This car is not a bucket, and it doesn't have the correct tag, so the filters output nothing. Filters for player roles work in almost exactly the same way. A role filter tells the Rangefinder not to output a player's ID unless they have the role that you specify here. If you want to learn more about player roles, find a link to another tutorial video in the description. Last thing, you can tick this box to keep the Rangefinder beam visible even when the body of the Rangefinder and all other gadgets are hidden. This doesn't affect how the Rangefinder works at all, but it's another cool way to create effects in your room. You can also use the Recolor tool in your Maker Pen to change the color of the beam. That is how to use the Rangefinder gadget. If this video was helpful, please give it a like, and subscribe to Recroom for more tutorials and lots of fun videos.